Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. It's a Tuesday night, and we are live. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 11 and the rest of the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, in our league, your team is getting smoked on defense. Your sabermetrics just are terrible on defense.
Yeah.
But Nick is also first in points, so Nick has an awesome team, and things are getting tight. And I think that's where everybody kind of is with their fantasy seasons right now. We are in Week 11. Playoffs are now, you can count, this is kind of where we are. You got to win your games, and you got to score a lot of points, and that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah, Nick and I got a big rivalry game this week. We are number 1 and 2 in points in our league, the one that we drafted live at the beginning of the season, this podcast season. Number 1 and number 2 in points. Unfortunately, my team defense, they are not using the sabermetrics. We are struggling. We are allowing 160 points per game at this point of the season, but luckily we are pacing I believe 165 points per game. So we're barely better than the points against. Barely.
Yeah. And we both have pretty good records too. I think you're 5-4.
6-4.
I think you're 6-4, and I am.
I think you're 7-3.
I think I have one game on you. So yeah, I mean, for just our league alone, it's tight. And I'm sure all of your leagues are tight as well. So that's kind of why we're here to help you with that. So it's a Tuesday night. If you're watching live, thank you for joining. We appreciate that. We are dropping shows on Mondays or Tuesdays every single week. It does kind of depend on our schedules, and today's a Tuesday recording day. So we're going live. If you want to get some last minute waiver wire information, we're going to start off the show with that. If you're listening on the recording, apologies, but you had all last night to kind of watch the live or the replay. So you can still listen to our waiver advice, but those players are probably gone. And then we're going to do our Week 10 recap, going through each game, biggest fantasy takeaway from each game. So loaded show, fun show. If you are watching the live, you can drop questions or comments anytime throughout the show. And we'll talk about that. So with that said, if this is your first time joining us, whether it is live or not, thank you so much. We do the show every single week. It's on all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We would appreciate that. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, you can do that on our YouTube channel. If you're watching us live, we are on YouTube as well. But if you're watching the replay or the podcast version on YouTube, that's acceptable as well. YouTube PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure to drop a like on any video that you watch. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that little bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live or drop a new video. We also do a live show every single Sunday, 8:30 or 9 o'clock Eastern time. It depends on the week. Nick's got a little kiddo in the house, so we like to get him a little bit of extra sleep if we can. We will let you guys know a day or two in advance, but we'll be early Sunday mornings. We give you all the advice that we can, answer your questions right before kickoff. We do have a lot of fun with that. So that the live show is available on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages. If you do want to ask us questions, we highly recommend YouTube or Facebook, as that goes directly to our question feed. Follow us and interact with us on all social media platforms. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. And then Twitter, Instagram, TikTok is PrimeTimeFFPod. So, Nick, we're going to start things off with Week 11 waiver wire, players that we want to target at our waiver wire in Week 11. And it is slim pickings at this point. At this point, it's kind of, if a Kenneth Walker goes down, Zach Charbonnet, or I'm just using it as an example. Probably shouldn't say that about my own team, but you get the point. The waiver wire is a bit depleted at this point. So we will still run through some guys. Let's look at some quarterbacks here. First off, we have Russell Wilson, who's owned in 51.9% of leagues. It's Matthew Stafford's still kind of hanging out there. People dropped him due to the injury. Should be coming back this week against the Seahawks, who he does play well against. He's only owned in 35% of leagues. Russell Wilson has, I'll pull up his schedule, or this week at least. So Nick, for this week, would you rather kind of pick up Stafford and play him against the Seahawks? or would you rather pick up Russell Wilson and play him against the Vikings on Sunday Night Football?
Both are good opportunities. I think I will still lean Stafford. Coming off the bye with that coaching staff, Cooper Kupp getting rest since the injury. Nakua is going to be out there. Kyron Williams has a chance to return from the IR. I don't
I
remember
think he is coming off the
next
IR.
week.
My
So
team needs him to, so.
you're looking at a Rams team that was clicking and looked a lot better at the start of the year against one of the weaker defenses in football in the Seattle Seahawks secondary. So you have some very big upside there. And the Rams, they pretty much have the Seahawks number. I feel like they both get each other now and then, but Sean McVay, that coach with that team going up against that defense, it's a good opportunity. And as good as Russ has been, I think I'd rather have him rest the season over Matthew Stafford, but that opportunity for a veteran quarterback, getting some rest, getting healthy, with that loaded receiving core and that upside in a division game, like it checks a lot of boxes for a successful fantasy day.
And it does come down to whatever you need. If you need a spot start, maybe. So, for example, last week I had Jalen Hurts on bye in our league, and I spot started Deshaun Watson. I think he had like a solid 20 points or something like that. So it kind of depends on what you need. If you need a spot start, maybe Stafford's the better player. And then if you need, if you maybe you have Justin Fields and you don't have a lot of confidence in Justin Fields, maybe you want to take a Russell Wilson so you have the options throughout the rest of the season. So for running backs, again, slim pickings, especially at running backs. So we have Devin Singletary owned in 50% of leagues. We have Zach Charbonnet owned in 38% of leagues. Keaton Mitchell, 35%. Where do you kind of want to go here, Nick? Singletary had 22 fantasy points in the start this past Sunday, but I think Dameon Pierce would probably be back. We'd probably see a 50-50 split. Charbonnet saw some nice field time, but Kenneth Walker is still super dominant. And the Ravens' backfield, to me, is just, it's tough to play any of them. I think Gus Edwards has the highest red zone potential. I think Keaton Mitchell's probably lapped Justice Hill on the depth chart, but then you have Lamar Jackson who's really running back one over there. So personally for me, there's no running back name that I'm really looking to target unless I have an open bench spot and I just want to throw somebody on there, but I'm not jumping for joy here.
For the most part, with these running backs, you're playing if the starter gets hurt. Unfortunately, it's not the game you want to play. But that's really the case. The only one I really think you could get away with is Keaton Mitchell. The Ravens are the number one rushing team in the league as of right now. So it is a running back carousel over there, and you do not really know who each week is going to be successful. But over the last few weeks, there's been multiple running backs each week from that backfield that have been successful. And Mitchell's have come off of big runs, but he's been playing very well. He's someone I do want to own. There is one more player that I would target that's not on this list because he did just get released, and we'll get to the news. Michael Carter, former New York Jets running back, very talented player. He's someone I really liked in his rookie year. And I said
for him.
I said at the end of the year, after his rookie year, like I really want him next year because that scheme's going to work very well. And then they drafted Breece Hall, who has been explosive, of course, had the injury last year, but Michael Carter was not breaking into that backfield. He was getting touches, and it was hurting the chemistry of the team with Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, who really deserve. Breece deserves a 70%, 80% snap share. Dalvin Cook really wants those 15 to 20 touches a game. It was never going to work with Carter back there, but he's very talented, and I don't think he's going to clear waivers. You're going to see a contender go up and grab him, or someone that has an RB opportunity like Minnesota. So
the Vikings, I think the Vikings will play him.
Yeah, so for me, he would really be the running back one that I'm targeting. I have a couple claims in him in a few leagues for Carter because he's barely rostered anywhere as the RB3 from the RB3 for the Jets.
So receivers, Brandon Cooks for the Cowboys owned in 43% of leagues. Demario Douglas on the Patriots owned in 31% of leagues. We have Noah Brown for the Texans owned in 26% of leagues. And I'm trying to see if there's and Elijah Moore is owned in 38% of leagues. I'll be honest here. I think Noah Brown kind of jumps out to me. I think that Noah Brown won't be on waivers after this week. I'm going to try to pull up his last couple weeks, so bear with me here. But I think he's lapped Nico Collins on the depth chart. I think we've kind of seen where CJ Stroud wants to go. I think it's going to be Tank Dell. I think it's going to be Noah Brown. And I think you'll also see a little bit of, what's his name? Dalton Schultz involved in there as well.
I agree. I think that receiver is the better position to target at this point. But I don't see any of these guys consistently breaking your starting lineup. The one that I would say probably has the most upside would be Demario Douglas from the Patriots. As somebody that's not a Patriots fan and has never wanted pieces of the Patriots offense, he seems to be getting the clear wide receiver one. Kendrick Bourne looked very good to start the year before he went down for the season, and he's really assuming the wide receiver one role over there. The Patriots also, for the rest of the season, have the easiest strength of schedule for the wide receiver position. And they do escape playing the Jets. I think they get the Jets in week 18. So I think it's 18. So that you're not going to see the Jets secondary for the rest of the year. They have one of the easiest schedules for the wide receiver position. And usually, you'd love your Justin Jefferson to get that, but it doesn't always work out that way. So Douglas is probably the one that could consistently sneak into your lineup, but the upside ceiling, I agree with you, Nick. I think it's Noah Brown. CJ Stroud has been phenomenal. Noah Brown's been out on that field catching a ton of balls, and he's showing all that talent in the world. He was very talented in Dallas. He just never got an opportunity, and he's really showing it here in Houston.
And then for the tight ends, Pat Fryermuth is coming off. I think it's a hamstring, I want to say. And then Luke Musgrave for the Packers. Both are owned in less than 40% of leagues. I'm not jumping for either of them, but if you do need a tight end stream like last week, I had to stream Luke Musgrave for Kelsey in 2 leagues. If you need a stream, pick them up. But if you don't need a stream, then I'm not going out of my way.
If you need a tight end, grab Fryermuth. If you do not need a tight end, or if you don't, any of these tight ends appeal to you, watch out, because I do think Taysom Hill will get dropped in leagues. He's going into the bye. Just had his worst game in 6 or 7 weeks as a Saint. So it's possible he does hit your waiver wire. So keep your eye out for that. But I'm not jumping for any of these guys.
Nick loves his Taysom Hill.
You gotta quarterback and tight end. Pretty much.
And then for defenses, we have the Dolphins defense, who is facing the Raiders on Sunday. And then we have the Lions defense, who will be facing the Bears. So those are 2 that I'd kind of picked out. I think the Rams defense is a sneaky play. I think they're going to get a lot of sacks. They do play my Seahawks very, very tough. I would have said the Commanders defense like 2 weeks ago, but they just traded their entire D-line. Yeah. Any other defenses that you might like?
Washington Commanders.
You still give them a shot?
Hosting the New York Giants. Danny DeVito or whatever his name is. I don't think it's not. Danny.
Oh, the Bills defense. If the Bills defense is on waivers, go get the Bills defense.
They're not on waivers. They're not great, but they've been pretty good. But Washington Commanders hosting the New York Giants that against DeVito. I forget his first name. It's not Danny. Danny's a short little actor dude. But the third string quarterback, he's been awful. He got garbage time points against
Anthony. Is it Anthony DeVito?
Tommy DeVito, I think.
Tommy DeVito. I think it's Tommy.
I thought so. I didn't want to screw up the name again. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's the ideal matchup. Like, they're going to smoke them. They're going to smoke them. And every single time they play, it's been a low-scoring game. I believe the last 3 times that they matched up, and all 3 were with Daniel Jones, the Giants scored under 20 points in each of those. I think they're averaging 13 in each of them. So there's no way that they're going to be able to cook Washington's defense in front 7.
If you combine both New York teams' offenses, I think it's still pretty bad. Like right now, not at the beginning of the season, I'm talking right now. I think it's still pretty bad.
Well, as sad as it is to say, if you combine the 2 of them, the only player
who starts at quarterback,
probably if Daniel Jones is healthy, it would be Daniel Jones just for probably mobility. But I mean, Saquon would be the RB2 for the Jets. Like that would be the only person that breaks the line.
Probably.
That's it.
Put my wide receiver at that point.
Yeah.
All right. Those are our waiver players. Again, week 11. There's not much there, guys. If the rest of the season, this is kind of what you're dealing with, but we'll still try to give you some solid names, every week. So moving on, we have a week 10 recap. We're going to go through every single game. Love doing this segment. And we give you our biggest fantasy takeaway from every single game. And we'll also talk about some injuries. And there was a little bit, which is unfortunate. But yeah, we will do that. So let me go to our little document thing. The Panthers played the Bears. And I forgot this game happened. I was on and off watching it. I only had Adam Thielen. Yeah, this happened, I guess. Nothing. I don't think anything fantasy relevant happened. Adam Thielen didn't have a great game.
Nope. Honestly, waste of a primetime slot.
I forgot that this game happened. I'm a football guy through and through, but yeah, I'm gonna check the box score just for fun. Dante Foreman had a solid game, 80 yards and a tutty, but now Khalil Herbert's coming back, so we'll see what happens with that.
Yep.
Miles Sanders had 2 carries for -5 yards. So there's that. DJ Moore had an okay-ish game. Cole Kmet had 5 for 45. And yeah,
And he had a rushing yard.
he had a rushing yard.
Rushing yard. Can't
Yeah, this is not one we need to harp on. So let's go to the next game. I will say, Bears did not activate Khalil Herbert before the game, but I guess he should be activated this week. Let's go to the next game because the next game has to be a little bit more exciting.
Probably higher scoring. You can't get much lower.
Colts at Patriots. Mac Jones kind of had a little injury in an X-ray, but I think he was fine after that. Yeah, the primetime games are rough this week. They were rough.
I will say.
What's your biggest fantasy takeaway from this one? Because there's a couple in here. The stats aren't too bad.
I think Ramondre is starting to kind of more assume that RB1 role.
I don't know. Zeke looked good, my man. Zeke looked good.
He's starting to get more closer to that 15 points per game mark. I think he's the RB14 on the year, I want to say right now, going into the bye. So he's getting a little bit more consistent. He's at 12 points per game. Over the last 5, he's only had 1 game under 13 points. So he's starting to pick up that role a little bit more. They're going to go into the bye. They're going to get the New York Giants right out of it. I think if the Ramondre Stevenson owner is somebody that's fighting for a playoff spot and needs a win this week, go trade for him because they're going to trade him low, knowing that they need another running back in this bye week. And I think it's a good opportunity. Listen, if you're getting right now, the running back position has been so inconsistent and so many injuries in fantasy where if you have an opportunity to go snag a running back like that, I think you just do it.
So we got a question. We will answer questions on our live shows. That's how it goes. So if you're listening on the podcast portion, you get to hear some questions. So from Mark Folkman, thank you, Mark, for the question. Tyler Algier or Dante Foreman worth dropping to pick up Keaton Mitchell? I'll drop Algier because I think Bijan Robinson finally found the end zone. We'll talk about him a little bit. I think he's clearly the running back 1 over there. So I think Algier is going to get phased out where Dante Foreman is going to compete with Khalil Herbert. And I think he's had like over 70 rushing yards for a couple games in a row. So I'm not sure what Foreman's role is going to be going forward, but I can tell you with my heart of hearts that I know Algier's role is about to get diminished. And could he rob a touchdown here and there? Sure. But you're never going to want to play Tyler Algier comfortably. And I think there is a world where you play Dante Foreman as your second running back in a playoff game. If I'm in a league where my running backs are DeAndre Swift and Tony Pollard, and if one of them goes down, I could use a Dante Foreman. I don't have Dante Foreman, but I'm just using him as an example. So I think as a running back 3 or 4, I would keep him on my roster where I have no use for Tyler Algier at this point.
Listen, Mitchell's had 2 healthy games as a Raven. He scored 20 and he scored 14. For the upside, I think I'd absolutely take Mitchell. I'd have no problem dropping Algier. Foreman, I do think can control that backfield. Just 1 year ago, the Bears were the number 1 rushing team in football with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert both being fantasy relevant. Of course, with Justin Fields at the helm, also getting those rushing yards. So I do think there's upside for Foreman. Algier, like Nick said, there's not going to be a week rest of the season where you can comfortably play him unless if Bijan gets... Don't even want to put it out there.
Well, Khalil Herbert's also a different back than Foreman. Foreman's a big back, so yeah. I could see them using both and Foreman getting a lot of the goal line work. So thank you, Mark, for that. From EVP, Tua, Sam Howell, or Josh Dobbs this week, and also which one should we trade? So Tua's against the Raiders, so I think you're playing Tua no matter what, in my opinion. I would try to trade Josh Dobbs. I know the Vikings have a little bit of an easy schedule, and he's been decent, but I think Sam Howell's been a top 10 fantasy quarterback on the season. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah,
I think
no, Sam Howell's the leader in passing yards on the year. I think he's the QB 3.
He's quarterback 3, yeah. So I would, but Josh Dobbs is quarterback 7. So if you could trade Josh Dobbs for something, I would trade Josh Dobbs and roll out Sam Howell or Tua the rest of the season.
Tua is the guy I really want to trade. I think he still has eye appeal, and a lot of people are after him. His
But would
playoff
you trust?
schedule.
But would you trust one of these two rest of the season?
I'd rather have Sam Howell just because I'm gonna pull up the playoff schedule for the Dolphins. It is brutal. I've been trying to trade him in one of my leagues because.
But by the way, Nick, I may need to retract my take while you're looking up Tua's numbers. I don't think Herbert can be my favorite stat sheet stuffer anymore. Sam Howell's quarterback 3, and you said he's leading the league in passing yards. I don't know. I think Herbert might not be my favorite stat sheet stuffer anymore.
I don't know. I mean, it's a fair take. I do actually think Sam Howell has shown some bright side, though.
I think so too. I don't think he's the problem with that team. And there's
So
a
the
lot of
playoff
problems
schedule
with that team.
for the Miami Dolphins is going to be the New York Jets in the first week, who have been shutting down receivers. The Dallas Cowboys, who have been up and down, sure, but have tended to play better on the back half. And championship week will get the Baltimore Ravens. If you're in a league that unjustly goes to week 18, you will also see the Buffalo Bills. So there is at no point. Listen, you're going to have Vegas this week, which will be phenomenal. Then you get at New York, not going to be great. Commanders should be good. Tennessee in primetime should be a good game. And then you go into a brutal playoff schedule. I would absolutely look to pivot off Tua now because I have him in a league. I don't want to play him. I really don't. I think I have Kyler Murray as my backup in that league. I'll happily roll out Kyler with that rushing upside versus risking Tua against 3 teams that have had 3 of the top 10 defenses in the league, with Dallas being the lowest. Like,
I don't want to play him against the Jets. The other 2, I have to make a decision that Sunday.
I wouldn't play him against the Ravens. That's a terrible.
But Watson just had a 20-point game against the Ravens. The Ravens are on my fraud alert. They were Nick's fraud alert. They're in my fraud alert.
They've blown in the fourth quarter, but they've been the top 3 defenses of football up until
they've been great, but what is their signature win this season? Am I forgetting about a signature win this season?
They beat Cincinnati earlier in the year, I believe.
Means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing to me.
Okay.
They don't have a signature win. They're just like the Dolphins, but they haven't gotten like a primetime loss. And the Dolphins, they barely lost to the Eagles in primetime. They barely lost to the Chiefs in primetime. Like I mean the Dolphins. Yeah, the Dolphins barely lost to both teams in primetime. So the Dolphins are catching a lot of flack.
I'll give you a couple. So Cincinnati was a big one. They beat Cleveland.
The Lions.
Cleveland. Hold on. Cleveland. Hold on. Stop interrupting, Nick. Cleveland 28-3. Detroit 38-6, Seattle 37-3.
Not impressive.
That's a couple major wins against some major franchises.
Detroit, I give them. Seattle, no. I'm a Seahawks fan, but I could have told you that a week in advance.
Seattle has been a top 10 team in the NFL up to this point of the year. You have to give it
10. Okay. I know we're going off topic. I'm going to list you 10 teams better than my Seahawks right now. The Dolphins is 1. The Ravens is 2. The Chiefs is 3, Philly's 4, Dallas is 5, Detroit 6, the Niners is 7. Maybe I can't give you 10, but I think at times Houston's look better. I think Cincy's a better team. If your Jets had a quarterback.
Yes, okay. If my Jets had Aaron Rodgers. Up to this point in the season, Seattle has been the 8th through 10th best football team in the league. Hate to say
I get it, but I think the Ravens is a bad matchup. I
said signature win. They shut down top 10 teams.
I still think that you have to keep Tua. I think he's too talented. The offense is too talented. I don't want to roll him out against the Jets, but the other 2 games,
he also hasn't had a great back half of the year.
Tua.
Yeah, I mean, he's been up and down. Listen, he's had 28-13, 28-15. 18, 22, 11, 22, 12. So, like, you're either going to get the 12-point game or you're going to get the 25-point game. So,
yeah, but I'd rather trade Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, but I'd rather play Sam Howell.
Well,
I think Tua you could get value for. I think you could get away with playing Howell or Dobbs in a championship.
Okay, another question. Me and my friends got Dobbs for Waller vetoed last week, and he asked y'all whether it was BS or not, and y'all agreed, and I'm subbing now. Oh, well, we appreciate that. Thank you for that. You definitely don't want Darren Waller right now, but you could trade Dobbs for somebody. We appreciate the sub, though. Joe says, should I be concerned about Lamar going forward? Absolutely not.
Nope.
Okay, let's get back to this Patriots game. So Jonathan Taylor got into the end zone. I was happy about that. Michael Pittman continues to impress. I saw something on Twitter the other day. I wish I had the stat, but he's on pace for I think it's 100 receptions and 1,100 yards or something. So I think he
He's
was a
putting up a
steal.
DJ Moore season, except
Yeah, he is. He was a steal of the draft though at round 8 or 9.
Yep.
And then Waiver darling Demario Douglas had 6 receptions for 84 yards. That's not bad in your flex spot. So the problem with both of these teams is they don't score points. So they're not fantasy friendly. So
correct. That's absolutely the problem.
Okay, next game. Let's see where the document takes us because it's
Texans at Cincinnati.
Okay, cool. Texans.
Oh, I've been itching to talk about this game.
Oh boy. So injury report. Dameon Pierce was out. T. Higgins was out and probably will not be cleared for Thursday's game against the Ravens. I can't tell you anything about Dameon Pierce. So Nick, I'll let you go first. If you want to do a Bengals football take and a fantasy take, you can. Fantasy wise, my man Joe Burrow looked like pretty good fantasy wise, 347 and 2 touchdowns. So I do want to remind you this is a fantasy podcast.
No, because you talk about my guy Herbert, you talk about my Jets, you talk all this slander about
Herbert's a great fantasy quarterback. I love Herbert as a fantasy quarterback, and I tell you this all the time.
Joe Shiesty.
You know what? No. Joe Burrow should be your favorite stat sheet stuffer.
Why?
The 374 and 2 touchdowns or 347.
He's stacking up the interceptions and the losses at this point. Those are the stats he's stacking up. They have not looked good. I would love to go on the fantasy side, but you know exactly what you're talking about. Burrow's a good fantasy quarterback. Jamar Chase is a good player. Joe Mixon's middle of the pack, mid RB2, low end RB1 at a ceiling. Football. We're going to talk some football on this live podcast. The Bengals are absolutely cooked. I said it a few weeks ago on this podcast, their season is over, and people were overreacting when they beat the petty Buffalo Bills. And then they got caught in this sandwich game where they had to play the Texans right before the short week of the Ravens.
Well, they beat the Niners. You're glazing over the fact that they beat the future Super Bowl champs.
They beat them without Debo and Trent Williams, 2 of their best offensive pieces. I don't want to hear it.
No. I'm going to fire back. No.
The 49ers,
who the Bengals have this week at wide receiver? They did not have T. Higgins. They had a banged up Jamar Chase. I'm just saying.
They went up against the Texans without Nico Collins, who's been a wide receiver 1, and Dameon Pierce, their running back 1. I don't want to hear it. Well, there is zero excuse to lose a game where you're a 7-point favorite.
They should not have lost this game. I agree with that. And Joe Burrow made some
there's one reason
down the stretch.
There is one reason they lost this game. It's not Tyler Boyd. It's Joe Burrow.
No, it's the defense, actually.
Joe Burrow threw costly turnover after turnover.
He did.
And I texted you during the game, and I said word for word, if Justin Herbert had this performance, you would come on this podcast and you would say stat sheet stuffer doesn't deliver in big moments. Well, guess what? Joe Burrow did exactly what I expected him to do in this spot, which is throw the game away because he is overrated. He had one phenomenal season and a measly playoff run the following year that got shut down by the real best quarterback in the AFC and probably the most talented quarterback ever.
I think it's unfair. He had back-to-back seasons. You just said he had one good season. He has back-to-back seasons with so he had 4,600 yards, 34 tutties, 14 INTs.
Loaded roster. He's had a loaded roster that's been healthy.
Mahomes is a loaded roster.
Where?
What do you mean where? He's the top 5 defense in the league. Best tight end in the league. Top 5 offensive line throughout his career.
He has no good pass catchers. It's been the whole talk of the season.
The Bengals defense has not been good this year. You can't tell me with a straight face the Bengals have not been good this year, but Burrow had a bad game. I will hold them against that. Burrow did have a bad game. He had a good fantasy game.
Consistently had bad games this year. Consistently.
Well, I give him a little bit of a pass with the injury, but after the injury, I think he's been solid.
No, he had a couple good games on a run, but he's really showing that this team is very flawed. And I'm not going to put it all on Burrow, but I am going to say that he has definitely gotten a lot more hype. And I do think by this time next year, we're having a very serious talk, just like we did Josh Allen, Did we overhype him too quickly because he went on his one Super Bowl run and made
Maybe, but let's you're talking about a run. So the injury wasn't fully healed till after Tennessee. After Tennessee, he has 300 yards against Arizona, three tutties, 1 interception. Against Seattle, 185 passing yards, 2 tutties, 1 interception. Against San Francisco, best defense in the league, by the way, San Francisco, 283, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions.
That was his best game of the year
at
sure.
San Francisco. The Bills, we could say the Bills are overrated now, but 3 weeks ago we weren't really saying that. So
I don't know about that.
Maybe you did, but it was a big game at the time. It was a big game at the time. You can't say it's not.
The reports about the Bills were that they had 3 major injuries at all position groups. Their defensive line, their linebackers, and their corners have been missing their 3 best players at each layer of the team, and that's why the Bengals were able to take care of that defense.
Okay, well, again, you play who you play, and he played well. He got 348, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Texans' loss was a bad loss, in my opinion. Worst loss of the season because they were on a run. They were on a 4-game winning streak. Burrow was healthy, and he didn't show up at moments where he should. Now, Tyler Boyd did screw him over. The defense did kind of screw him over, but the defense also bailed him out with a pick late. So I will be honest here, and I'll say he did not play his best football game. I don't think he's overrated. I think the fact that he has over 4,400 passing yards and 34 touchdowns to back-to-back seasons with a passer rating of 100 and back-to-back AFC championship games, I don't consider that overrated. I consider that very, very tough because getting to a championship game is very, very tough if you're not Patrick Mahomes. And I think we're just I think we're grazing over that fact of how tough it is. My Seahawks, as good as they were, only made 2, Russell Wilson, as much as they loved him and how much you loved him, only made, 2 NFC championship games. So I think
if you swapped Joe Burrow with, I could probably name 5 quarterbacks off the top of my head. With those 5 quarterbacks, they wind up in the same exact position that they did. The only difference might be beating Kansas City 2 years ago. That might be the only difference. But I think Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, those 3, and obviously Patrick Mahomes, those 4 off the top of my head, I think if you swap them immediately, would have done just as well, if not better.
Okay, but let's play that game. You put Joe Burrow and the Eagles, they're in the same spot. You put Joe Burrow and the Bills, they're probably in the same spot. You put Burrow and the Chiefs, they're in the same spot.
Buffalo bad, yeah.
They're in the same spot. The only quarterback we could have this argument with is Justin Herbert, and I do give him crap, but I do think if he was on the Chiefs, or maybe even the Bengals, he'd probably be in a better winning spot. I will say that. But I'm not going to excuse the loss to the Jags last year. That was pathetic. You need to score in the second half. I think you said your point. I admitted that he did not have a good game. I think I was very fair with my Joe Burrow take.
That's okay. We're going to revisit this next week on next week's live.
Yes, we have to revisit next week because if they lose to the Ravens, I will crown them dead.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. From a fantasy standpoint, like Noah Brown, 172 was great. Dalton Schultz, 4 for 71. Tank Dell, 6 for 56. Your stars kind of showed out here. Tyler Boyd at 8 for 117. Devin Singletary had 30 for 150, which just shows how bad that Bengals defense looked. And they really did look bad. I don't have any other fantasy take in this game. Like, I think your stars showed out in this game. Even if Burrow looked bad as a player, like he still had like 25 fantasy points. So,
yep.
We have some questions here. Hopefully you enjoyed our little rant. We do have some of those. I got Taysom, so I said, screw it. Waller can come back in the playoffs. And Nick, what's you?
I would still play Taysom probably through that stretch. You're not going to have Daniel Jones. Even though the game script might look good, that offense is going to only run through Saquon Barkley. Darren Waller was playing fine up until the injury. Listen, we're going to have to reassess when it gets back and see what that team looks like. But as of right now, for me, Taysom Hill, there's only probably 4 tight ends, maybe 5 that I'd lock in over him. TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. I think Taysom Hill would be my number 5 rest of the year.
All right. From Mark again. Mark says he's planning on riding Nick's Jets defense rest of the season. Good idea streaming your defense better. I would keep the Jets D for sure. If you need to stream certain weeks, you can, but I would definitely keep them on your bench for sure.
Totally agree with that. It's always going to be matchup dependent for defense, but the Jets have been shutting down teams and holding them for good fantasy weeks.
Yep. From the Smitty, need a wide receiver. Wide receivers are Sutton, Amari Cooper. I need to know which Brown you have because there's a billion of them. I'm assuming it's Marquise, Nico Collins, Tyler Boyd. Running backs, Kamara, Aaron Jones, CMC. Would you trade Lamar for Kupp and Elijah Mitchell? I need to know who your backup quarterback is, but I think trading for Cooper Kupp right now is a slam dunk trade because he's had 2 rougher games and Stafford's coming back. I'm all for this if you have a quarterback you could play, but you can't roll out a bum at quarterback.
I totally agree with that. I'm entirely on board.
It was Marquise Brown, so just let us know who your other quarterback would be, or if you get one off of waivers. Okay, next game. Saints at Vikings. Derek Carr, oh no, shoulder concussion. Hoping to return in week 12. Oh no. I want Jameis out there. I really, really, really want Jameis out there.
I don't.
No, I do. I'm a Chris Olave owner in 3 leagues, and I want Jameis out there.
They are going into the bye week. Very important to note. So Derek Carr will probably come back healthy right after. But Taysom Hill did not see the field after Derek Carr got hurt.
Well, that's why you don't want him out there.
That is why I do not want him out there.
Jameis is also fun.
I love Jameis. I love Jabu. I was hoping that the Jets traded for him.
I was too. I said
I was really hoping for it, and unfortunately, it did not happen.
Michael Thomas, knee injury, will be questionable coming out of the bye. Alexander Madison, I don't think he's on bye. He sustained a concussion, so he is concussed. Justin Jefferson was unactivated from the hamstring injury, so he probably maybe will come back next week. Yep. What's your fantasy takeaways from this one? DJ Hawkinson, an awesome game. I don't see a lot of fantasy takeaways from this besides like Jameis makes Olave's life so much better.
I think the big thing is going to be, and I think that it's going to be a league winning team. I think Minnesota is going to either make or break a lot of fantasy championships. Josh Jacobs has looked phenomenal over these last 2 weeks, and he has ever really resurrected his career. I think he's going to be looked at more as like a Jacoby Brissett, where
I think he's the Ryan Fitzpatrick now. I think he's earned a backup job for life.
I think it's more Jacoby Brissett, where I think it's the best backup quarterback in football who will always be in the conversation when a quarterback gets hurt to get traded to start. Could have a journeyman type career. But Minnesota, that defense still does not look fantastic. That offense is explosive. They are going to get Justin Jefferson back.
And they'll be playing from behind a lot of games as well.
Yes. So I think if they can sustain,
they have 2 games against the Lions down the stretch, by the way, their defense, they have a good pass rush, but their defense is still going to let up points.
Yeah, I agree with that. So listen, if Josh Dobbs can sustain this, great. A lot of those Vikings receivers and playmakers are going to win you a championship. But if he comes a little bit more back down to reality, and right now I was listening to a few shows with how bad QBs have been this year. Josh Jacobs has probably been one of the 15 best quarterbacks in football over the course.
Which is crazy to say.
I know. So, and from a stat perspective, we see it. You can see it with fantasy because he is a top 10 quarterback on the year and he's played for 2 different teams. So, not going to say much more than if he could sustain it.
I wish Josh Dobbs was a Jet.
I know.
Come on, that'd be so much fun.
I think the Jets went into the season as the most hated team in the league outside of maybe the Cowboys. Rodgers got hurt. They got sympathy after they beat the Bills. And then have quickly become so hated again because Rodgers has been so much in the spotlight. Josh Dobbs would have made people love the Jets.
Maybe. So Smitty says the other quarterback is Purdy. Yeah, go get Cooper Kupp. He's too good. He's too good. Yep. Okay, next game. Packers at Steelers. I believe I saw earlier that Jaylen Warren is going to be the running back 1 this week. Yes. So that's very notable.
So supposedly, Tomlin told the team last week that Jaylen Warren was going to assume the RB1 role. And Jaylen Warren had, I believe, 100 yards in his best game of the year. Posted, I believe, a top 10 week or top 12 week for running back. So they're now comfortably going to make him the RB1 over Najee Harris.
And Freiermuth should return from his hamstring injury. This week, the Steelers have... I'm sorry. This is bad radio. The Steelers have the Browns.
Yep. Tough matchup.
I don't know. Jalen Warren, maybe league winner. Maybe.
So I have him this week potentially up against.
I think it's going to be, I'm sorry to cut you off again. I think it is going to be more of a 60-40 split. I don't think they just phase out Najee because so Jalen Warren was 15 for 101 with a touchdown. Najee was 1682 with a touchdown, both with a long of 20 and 24, average of 6.7 and 5.1. So both of them did have solid games, but I'll let you take your point now.
So Warren is the RB28, Najee is the RB29. Over the last 4 weeks, Najee has 16, 10, 15, 18. Jalen Warren, who they said this week has taken over, had 19 in PPR, but 10, 8, 14, and 19. So the two of them have had pretty identical seasons from a fantasy perspective and production standpoint. If Warren really is going to take over this role, he should finish inside the top 20 as a running back. If he could get to that 60% snap share, like Nick's saying. I don't know if that's going to really happen. I don't know how much that's going to come through to fruition. But I own him in 2 leagues, so I'm really hoping so, especially because I would have him this week against Nick, depending on if Madison comes back from injury.
I have no other fantasy takes. Like the Packers are one of the least friendly fantasy teams. And I don't want to rag on Nick's Jets too much, but like it's the Giants, the Jets, the Packers, the Titans.
And Garrett have been good, but I got you.
Yeah, I'd put the Jets at 4 or 5 probably. The Titans are pretty bad. Speaking of the Titans, let's go to the Titans game here. I wonder what we'll have to say about this one. Every time I see the Titans, I'm just
I think they're becoming the new Falcons for me. I just
Nick, how about you talk about Mike Evans because he was great again.
Oh, I didn't want to talk about Evans.
I'll talk about Evans. Steal the draft, and Nick was all over him before the season. 6 for 143 and a tutty. Chris Godwin's kind of underperformed, I guess. And my last point, as I said on the show, that our Sunday morning show, that Rachaad White's a pretty solid trade for target. I mean, 20 carries for 51 yards. His average is not great, but the Titans have a solid front seven. Also had 2 receptions, 47 yards, and a tutty. So, trade deadline's kind of this week. I think he now has like 4 straight weeks over 20 fantasy points. So I would go trade for Rachaad White if you can, but you may have missed your window.
Yeah. My big question mark is the other running back in this game, Derrick Henry. It's been a very up and down season, and I've said repeatedly I want him against the Texans for those 2 playoff games. It's the only reason why I drafted him in leagues this year, saying if I can hit home runs in other places in the draft, Derrick Henry will carry me to the title. Oh, man, he has been very up and down, very rough this year. In these tougher matchups, he has been getting taken down. He is not running over players like he used to. He is not an explosive running back. He is a run through your throat. And they're not giving him enough work in the passing game for him to deliver consistently. My God, do I hope that take is right, because I put a lot of eggs and a lot of stock into Derrick Henry, because I had a couple people making me trade offers for Christian McCaffrey that involved Derrick Henry and someone else in some leagues, and I refused them. I turned them down earlier in the year, and that could really bite me if Derrick Henry does not deliver down the stretch.
49ers at the Jags. Deebo Samuel returned from, I think it was hamstring injury. This was a
slaughtering.
This is a slaughtering, but I was going to say, like, this was a leveling out game because the Niners are here. They're top of the league. They are the best team in the NFL. And the Jags are borderline middle. Trevor looks bad. And he's looked bad for the majority of the season. He basically had one good in his NFL career. He's basically had one good half of a season, and I hate to be so negative, but yeah, he's looked really bad. And even against bad teams, he's looked bad. Like he looked bad against the Falcons. And another one from a fantasy standpoint, I was all over that Calvin Ridley was being overdrafted. I'm gonna just pat myself on the back for that one. Christian Kirk, another great game, 6-104. I know it's only 16 fantasy points, but all over that one. Credit to me. I get a lot wrong, but I was right on that one.
Going a little further on that, Trevor Lawrence, he has been really bad this year. It's a big reason, and not to bring it to a real football, because me and Nick talk a lot of football offline as well. It's a big reason why I still say that Justin Herbert has been a better quarterback than Trevor. I understood the debate after last year's playoff game, but this year he has 9 touchdowns and 10 turnovers. The Jaguars are winning despite his play. And granted, a little bit of an outlier.
The defense in ETN, sorry to cut you off, the defense in ETN looked great for the most part.
Yeah, listen, it's been disproportionate because ETN has scored a ton of touchdowns on the ground this year. But at the end of the day, I mean, they really have not been one of the best teams in the league. Like, they have not capitalized. Their record is a lot better than the team actually is. And I don't want to act like Trevor Lawrence is in a tough situation and is overcoming anything, because he's not. That offense is loaded. They have speed guys everywhere. Evan Engram, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, who just got arrested, and Christian Kirk. You got Travis Etienne out of the backfield. Like, that offense is very well set. Supposedly, the coaching over there has been phenomenal, and it has done wonders for Trevor Lawrence since the Urban Meyer rookie year. So you can't act like he's facing adversity. And I saw something very true about this, and it's kind of stuck with me ever since. And I'm starting to turn. I liked Trevor. Then I was like,
Nick was all over Trevor pre-draft. And we had a conversation. I was in my first apartment down here, and the Jets had just won a game. And I think I was like brushing my teeth, and Nick was so upset.
Oh, I was pissed because we were going from the
so
1 pick to the number 2, with 2 weeks left in the year. But what's it called? I lost my train of thought when you jumped me, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. We can move on.
You're talking about a stat or take that you saw about Trevor that you started.
Oh, yeah. So Trevor Lawrence, I don't know if anybody remembers him saying this when he was coming out, but he said like something along the lines of football is not like him. Like, he likes football. He doesn't love football. He doesn't have that passion for football that some of these other guys do. Even like Cam Newton had like a distinct love for football, which is why he still tries to fight to get back into the league no matter what. But Trevor Lawrence is more like Andrew Luck, where it was like, I like football. I'm good at football, so I play football, but I don't love it, which is why Andrew Luck, you never heard after he retired, Andrew Luck could come back. Where did he go? He went to manage the XFL after. Like,
he never
that's where his
wanted
role was. And Trevor Lawrence had a couple lines of that coming out of college. So for me, I've definitely turned the page a lot more on him. I don't have as much love and admiration as I did when he was coming out. But for a fantasy perspective, he's not pushing the ball down the field. He's not scoring enough touchdowns. He is not mobile enough and getting enough rushing yards to make up your fantasy week. So for me, I mean, I have him in one league. He is totally going to sit on my bench for the rest of the year. I can't see myself putting him back in, but and I don't want to harp too much on this, but last year after week 10 is when the Jaguars did turn their year around and where Trevor really did start heating up. So could he do it? Sure, but for 10 weeks we have.
He's going to need to, because the Texans are breathing down their neck right now. The Texans are going to be a playoff team.
Yep, they have every potential to win that division, and I don't believe they will, but the Colts are right there too. The Colts are right there with the Texans with the same exact record. I believe they're maybe 1.5 games behind.
No. I am not watching a Colts playoff game. Nope. Browns at the Ravens. My favorite Cleveland team. They won. They beat the Ravens. Wow. My fantasy.
If you watch that game, the Ravens beat themselves in the fourth quarter.
They did. But that's why I say the Ravens are kind of.
That's what happens in football.
Okay, so my big fantasy takeaway is that Deshaun Watson looks healthy-ish, but he's back-to-back games, 19 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points. If you need a streamer, Watson seems to be leveling out and returning to kind of the form that we were sort of used to, and that will help out guys like Amari Cooper, who had 6 for 98, and Njoku had 6 for 58. Jerome Ford had an awesome game, so not to just rely on the run game like we've seen in Cleveland over the past few years. I have no take on the Ravens. They literally their offense is so annoying. They spread the ball around. They have 5 different running backs. Like, they are an unfriendly fantasy team.
I really don't want to take much away from this game because the Ravens look good for the majority of the game. Cleveland caught right back up into the game. It felt fluky to me. Like, I don't think the Browns are that team on offense. I don't see them having comeback wins like that against superstar teams, but they could make the playoffs. So when you could make the playoffs, your foot's going to be on the gas pedal and you're going to be pushing the ball for wins. So Elijah Moore is someone we talked about on the waivers. If you're in that later bracket, one of the top 3 teams in your league, I think he is a good player to go grab, stash. He just had his best week of the year. And maybe if Deshaun Watson does consistently play like this, Elijah Moore could be somebody that you're flexing in your championship.
All right. Falcons at the Cardinals. No real injury news in this one. Kyler Murray did return from the ACL injury. James Conner returned off the IR. From the Falcons side of things, nothing changed except for Bijan Robinson scored a touchdown.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you know who the Falcons are. The one thing I will say is, you know who Kyler Murray is. And I've loved Kyler Murray for years. He delivered in a big spot 2 days after Call of Duty came out. You got to give him all the credit in the world.
I forgot about that one.
Winning performance.
That's awesome. Trey McBride is also an awesome tight end. 8 receptions, 131. We didn't see what we wanted from Marquise Brown, but I'm not worried. It'll come. Game of the week, I think. Detroit Lions at the Chargers, at least the fantasy game of the week. I mean, if you had anybody from this game, I mean, I think you got to be happy. We did. Nick was all over that over.
Under, they're going to all hit. Period.
Jared Goff is awesome. Over 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. On the other side, Justin Herbert did not lose the Chargers this game. 323, 4 tutties, and 9 INT. I mean, the running backs were good. Like Montgomery had 116 yards and a tutty. Gibbs did look better and got the bulk of the work, but he had 77 yards, 2 touchdowns. Eckler had receptions and some rushing yards, a down game for Eckler. On the receiving side of things, just Amon-Ra and Keenan. Like if you had both of these guys on a team, you had to have won your week. Amon-Ra, 8 receptions, 156 for a touchdown. Keenan Allen, 11 for 175 and 2 tutties. Like, I don't know if you have a takeaway from this one. My takeaway is just like they're good. They're 2 good offensive football teams, and you're going to play your guys every single week. I don't have any takeaway besides that.
The only real takeaways would be on the football side, and I'll keep it brief because of that. My God, do I hope Bill Belichick is the coach of the Chargers next year. That defense has studs, and those guys have no idea where to be on a football field. Derwin James might be the most talented safety in all of football, and he looks like a shell of a player out there with the horrendous coaching that Brandon Staley has. Brandon Staley has been the coach of that team for 2 years now. He is a defensive-minded coach, and he has not been able to get his side of the ball correct. He needs to get it right. If Bill Belichick got over there or to Buffalo, which I hot take, I think he's going to sign there. And now that there's an offensive coordinator opening, he'll bring Josh McDaniels with him, and they will go coach that Buffalo Bills team to a Super Bowl, or that he could go coach the Chargers to a Super Bowl. And I hope that really does happen for the Chargers, not for the Bills, because they're in my division. And I would hate to see Belichick there anymore with the superstar quarterback, but for fantasy, you know these guys every week are going to deliver fantasy numbers. You play every single one of those players from those teams. You know who they are. We don't need to reiterate it.
Giants at the Cowboys. I have no thoughts on the Giants. As for the Cowboys, though, they hate Tony Pollard. I don't know why. They don't like Tony Pollard, especially in the red zone, and it makes me very, very sad. It makes me really sad as a Tony Pollard owner in one of my 5 leagues. So please free Tony Pollard.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is keep your eye out on Rico Dowdle. He is getting a ton of usage now, far more than I really think he should be getting. Tony Pollard only averaging 12.5 points per game, has probably been the running back bust on the year. Outside of the injuries.
I would call him the biggest bust out of all the busts. He was drafted in the top 15, 20 in most leagues, and I'm one of them. I'd call him the bust of the busts. And that's
the only one I think that you could debate is Barkley, but he did miss a couple weeks with the injury, so I'll give him some slack there. But
he's also on a terrible offense right now. Like there's no excuse for Pollard not to be scoring touchdowns.
It's purely the coaching, and it sucks. It sucks.
Yep.
I was so high on Pollard. I thought he was such a beast for 2 years, and this happened.
Also for the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb is ridiculous. He might end up being the wide receiver 1 on the season. Last 3 weeks, 29, 17, and 28. Just like absurd. There is a team out there that drafted AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb and then Keenan Allen, and you're just reaping the rewards of it, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Commanders at the Seahawks. my man Gino, he wrote back this game. Looked pretty good. But the Seahawks are not a fun fantasy team, and I could own up to that one.
No, they're not fun for fantasy. I am so disappointed in Jahan Dotson. The one thing I will say, and we talked about Sam Howell a lot with the question earlier. My God, I hope Eric Bieniemy has proved himself to get a head coaching job in this league, and whatever team signs him to revise their quarterback room with him, man, do I want that player next year. And
Well,
I'm going to make a notes thread, and
Ron Rivera needs the freaking tan. So
I don't know. I mean, I agree. I don't think Ron Rivera is a great coach, and it seems like he always has beef with his players and his coaching staff. But
do you remember his quote from the Eagles game, like week 3?
I don't, but I remember being like, "What?"
They would have tied the game. They were going to tie the game with an extra point in Philly or go for 2, and they choose to kick the extra point and go to overtime. And they lose in overtime. The reporter asks him, "Why'd you not go for 2?" And he goes, "Thought my players were gassed." Then why would you go to overtime?
That's rough.
I was all over Brian Robinson on the pre-show on Sunday, and only 38 rushing yards on 8 carries, but they kind of abandoned the run game because they were just passing all over the Seahawks Swiss cheese defense. And Brian Robinson had 6 receptions, 119 passing yards, and a touchdown. Awesome. And on the Seahawks side of things, they kind of were fantasy friendly this game. DK Metcalf had, looks like 17, 18 fantasy points. And Tyler Lockett looks like he had 8 receptions, 92 and a touchdown. I did tell you the Lockett games are coming. And there is one of your 5 or 6 big Tyler Lockett games for the season.
Yep.
And poor JSN is just still, there's no spot for him. He's not the problem.
No. And he does look pretty good, but that team has good players, period.
Yep.
We had
yeah, I know. I had a stupid point. My stupid point about JSN is his role on the team is wide receiver screens. And I swear, Pete Carroll has this obsession with wide receiver screens and has had it for like 10 years. And they work 1 out of 10 times, maybe less. It drives me nuts.
Maybe you guys need to bring in a good offensive coordinator. I know a couple years ago you were talking about bringing in Adam Gase to pair him back with Jamal Adams.
All right. Question from Randy Miller. Trade Waddle and Breece Hall for Tyreek in a PPR league?
I love this question.
I would need to see your running backs because Breece is going to have a really excellent next 6 weeks, I think. And Breece is really talented, and running back is such a thin position. Yeah, I don't think I would do it because I just feel like you're probably too thin at running back.
So
I would want something back in return. I want like a Dante Foreman or something back in return.
My only question is, who are your backup running backs? I agree with Nick. Let's say you had solid running backs and guys, you'd have to plug somebody in for Breece that's solid. I think it's a no-brainer because Jalen Waddle will be up and down. He's the wide receiver 31 on the season, even though he's been much more consistent than that, but has not showed the high ceiling of Tyreek Hill at all this season. Tyreek Hill's worst game of the year was 10, then it was 12, then 15, then 25. So Tyreek Hill has been an automatic, like, week-to-week winning wide receiver for your team. The schedule does scare me, but it also would for Waddle, and Breece Hall and those Jets have been too inconsistent. His snap share will go up with Carter now being gone, but that combination for Tyreek Hill, very hard not to win with Tyreek Hill in your lineup.
I don't think you need Tyreek Hill. You have Amon-Ra, who's a top 5 receiver right now. You have Devontae Smith. You have Waddle. You have Zay Flowers. I think you need Breece Hall in your running back slot here.
I disagree with Nick here.
Okay.
I think you can plug in Jerome Ford for Breece Hall, and if you can put in Tyreek, Amon-Ra, and Devontae Smith every single week for the rest of the season, it's going to be very hard to beat you because that is just me and Nick. And Nick said this to me 2 years ago, and it's stuck in my head, and I think it's made me a better fantasy player. Just take the guy that's going to get you more points. If you do that in your draft, you're going to win your games. You're going to be a points leader. And I have 4 leagues. I'm in the top 4 in scoring in all 4 of those leagues. It is purely because I listened to that strategy, and that means just abandon the running back room if you can get your superstar receivers.
I do like the compliment. I appreciate it. And I do like going with my own point, but my worry here is what if Jerome Ford gets hurt? Then for your playoff, you're running with Keaton Mitchell, who's sharing the running back room, Chuba Hubbard, who wouldn't want to trust. I feel like you need a running back 3 you could trust. And right now, Jerome Ford's your running back 3.
Well, here's now where I think it could get interesting. Now you can package Zay Flowers away with somebody else because he's not
That's
going
true.
to be starting lineup
That's true.
ever again.
That's true. So if you make this trade for Tyreek Hill
right now, can you package Jerome Ford and Zay Flowers and go get a Derrick Henry?
Nick's right. You would have to make 2 trades right now before the trade deadline to make this work, I think. Otherwise, you might screw yourself at running back.
But
Nick's
this
right
is the kind of team that you're going to need to win a fantasy championship. Period. End of story. That's how you win titles. I made a trade in a league today. I don't think I won the trade. I'll be honest. I think I gave up a lot more than I need. But if you take a look at my lineup, I added Jalen Waddle for Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown, and Kareem Hunt. 3-for-1 deal. I had to give up a lot of assets. But Jalen Waddle, I'm slotting in now to be my wide receiver 4 or 5 on my team because the other guys just are not going to see my lineup anymore. For me, the only adjustment is now upgrading Marquise Brown. In your situation, you're getting a massive upgrade at receiver, and you have to replace a running back with, I think you have solid players that can fill the role. Breece Hall, the fact is, if he doesn't find the end zone and he's gotten these 50-yard runs that have made his weeks, I honestly, in my opinion, I think that you should make that trade, and you should be texting everybody in your league right now who wants Zay Flowers and Jerome Ford and go get a stud running back.
Okay. Let's run through these last 2 games. Jets at the Raiders, Sunday Night Football. I got nothing. The Jets offense with Zach Wilson is just pitiful. Garrett Wilson did have a good game. I'll give him that. Breece Hall did not. Josh Jacobs, 27 for 116, no touchdown, 2 receptions. So you're looking like a 13-point game. Devonta Adams was just okay. These are 2 teams without a quarterback. Aidan O'Connell's okay, but the Jets defense is really solid. So I guess my takeaway is I really don't want to play any quarterback into the Jets defense, especially a mid quarterback. I could deal with Mahomes or Hurts, but if you're not in my top 3 or 4, I don't want to play Josh Allen against the Jets.
That I agree with.
That's my takeaway from.
Although I will say Allen is the QB1 on the year, so you can't bench him, of course. My takeaway is
no. Hold on. What would you do if you had Allen and Howell? Allen against the Jets.
I got to see who Howell plays that week. But I mean, listen, it's a debate. It's more of a debate. But I mean, you're talking about playing the QB3 in fantasy over the QB1. It's not the craziest thing in the world, except when you put the name into it, obviously.
Right.
Take the name away. You got a stat sheet stuffer. I got to see who they play. I'm sorry. Give me a second to pull it up because I got to see.
No, it's okay. I don't know who they play either. And I'll start moving on while you're looking. So
real quick. So it's this week. It's the Buffalo at the Jets.
Yep.
Or the Jets at the Buffalo, and then you get the Commanders hosting the Giants. It's very hard to.
I'd play Sam Howell.
Listen, I'm going to be honest. I don't have this situation. I'm going to tell you to play Sam Howell. If these 2 are on my lineup, I would not have the balls to bench Josh Allen for Sam Howell.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
That's fair. Okay. Final game of the week. Broncos at the Bills. This game went exactly how I think everybody expected it. Not at all. Russ cooked. Kind of. 193, 2 tutties for Russ. Javonte Williams got the bulk of the carries, and he's just been okay. Cortland Sutton was the wide receiver 1, which is weird. James Cook had 110 yards with 3 fumbles or something. Still doesn't get the goal line work. I got no thoughts about this game, man. It was a weird game. Bills offense was clearly off. I think there's something off with that Bills team. I'm not sure they really like each other. They'll still produce, but something feels weird about the Bills.
I agree with you. I will also say something that does feel weird is that one of the most consistent receivers in fantasy football this year has been Cortland Sutton. He is the wide receiver 24 right now in the year. He only has 1 game under 11 fantasy points this whole season. He has not found the end zone much, which means that he's getting a lot of catches and a lot of yards to have that consistency. So I called it last year, did not hit. I thought he'd be a top 10 guy, did not hit. But Nick, there is a shot that he outscores Devontae Adams on the season. So if he does, I am going to take that and I'm going to shove it in front of this whole crowd because he's only averaging 0.8 less points per game.
You kind of can, but it's not your take this year. So like you could laugh about it, but you can't like do an I told you so like I can with like Calvin Ridley.
Yeah,
you could laugh. You could call Adams your bust of the year, but you can't do a shove like you could have last year.
You were right. You were right.
From Chandler Costantino. Sorry about that. I'm bad with pronunciation sometimes. Okay. Do either of these trades, Fields kind of he's asking if you should do either of these trades. So Fields, Connor, Mike Evans for Josh Allen and Swift. I'd have to know who your other quarterback is. Or
I would do Burrow and Connor for Hurts.
Burrow and Connor for Hurts. My running back is Pollard, Etienne, Connor, Kyron, Hunt.
You can get away with Etienne and Connor rest of Etienne and Kyron.
And Kyron. But then you're running. I like the running back 3, and I like Kyron as my running back 3. I'm not sure I want to make a trade right now.
Well, I would do
Burrow?
it.
I think he has Burrow. If you have Burrow, if you have Burrow and Fields, don't make a move. You're fine. You can stream either one each week. Fields is going to come back and be productive, and Burrow's still going to be productive. I wouldn't make a trade for a quarterback.
This is where I think you have the potential to make a trading masterclass. And Nick, we're going to have to sit here for a second and work on this. But if you do a Burrow and Connor for Jalen Hurts trade, you can have
Connor and Kyron for somebody.
Well, if you go upgrade Burrow and Connor for Hurts, Nick is saying you need another running back. So why not package Pollard and Hunt and go get somebody? Maybe go get Breece Hall, another name we just spoke about. You can manipulate enough pieces together to make a deal. If you're getting rid of Burrow and you're getting Jalen Hurts, you're not going to bench Jalen Hurts any game the rest of the season. So now you can pivot off Justin Fields and package him with Tony Pollard and go get maybe Breece Hall or something like that. You can make 2 trades. Same thing we advised for Randy Miller. Just because you accept this one trade doesn't mean you can't pivot elsewhere.
Yep. All right. That's all we got. That is our show for today. Thank you guys for the questions and joining the live. We appreciate that. There will be some weeks where we are live and you'll see us post about it, and you come join and listen to our show. So the next time you hear from us will be our live show Sunday morning. We'll probably do 9. We haven't talked about it yet. It's going to be 8:30, 9-ish, something like that. But we'll let you guys know on Friday. Live show to answer all of your fantasy questions right before kickoff of all the games, bright and early to help you out with your fantasy lineups. Live show will be on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Our YouTube and Facebook is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. If you're watching the video right now, make sure you drop a like on it. We'd appreciate that. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also hit that little bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live. You can find our weekly shows on all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. Again, if you want to keep following us and interact with us on social media, it's Primetime FF Pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions. Best of luck in your waiver wires. Set them before they actually go through tonight. And we'll talk to you guys on Sunday.